Welcome to the Reddit selection, where the wildest, funniest, and most jaw-dropping stories from Reddit come to life. Today we are diving into NuclearRevenge. Sit back, grab a snack, and enjoy the show. Steal money from me. Hope it was worth losing everything. Summer 2022. I applied to work as a bartender at a small bar and country club because it was offering $35 a week at $15.50 sure. They hired me to replace another student bartender who wasn't working out. I show up for my first day and it's all normal. Sign the contract about my hours pay, tax forms, code of conduct, training, etc. The day ends and I've got about 8 hours, so things are going well. The whole first week is pretty good. I don't hit 35 hours, but with training I hit 29. I rationalized that I was a last-minute replacement, and the schedule had already been made. My manager is a bitchy but manageable. Second week I notice my hours are still less than the promised 35 week. But don't mention it because I'm thinking maybe it's just because of the first schedule I'm on, and they want to make sure I can run a bar alone. By the third week of May, I end up asking my boss about increasing my hours, because I was promised 35, and I'm consistently being scheduled for 16-18 week, and she tells me she can't, and that if I can wait until July when the other bartender leaves for maternity leave, I'm going to get all her hours. I agree, and wait it out. Then in July 2 things happen. 1. I'm called into a meeting with my manager and the president, who sit me down and essentially admit they lied on the job posting. I was never going to get those hours, and it's unreasonable for me to expect that. I ask to see my contract that I signed, and they bald-faced lie, and tell me that I never signed a contract. I ask them to email me that in writing for my records, and they don't. 2. They hire a new bartender. I'm raving about this situation to my friend on FaceTime, and he cuts me off and asks if my job funding is grant-based. Whip is when I realize that not only is my job grant-based, but it's a grant sponsored by the government. I hang up and call my provincial government office for student summer jobs, and asked if they would be interested in knowing that one of their grant recipients was stealing money from the grant. And they were extremely interested in all sorts of stuff. Like who did all the bookkeeping, my manager. Who did the hiring, my manager. Who was able to access payroll and the bank accounts, just my manager. And it turns out that the country club had received this grant so many times. The provincial government was interested in doing an audit of their finances. Because it turns out that company had been receiving the grant for about 10 years, each time in a lump sum. Meanwhile, I get into a massive fight with my manager, because she is ignoring my request for pay stubs. She finally give me half of them to shut me up. I take them home and immediately file them away with the corresponding bank deposit record. 3 days after I receive my pay stubs. It's July, and I've been asking weekly since May. So another legal business practice. I'm unexpectedly pulled into another meeting with a much more harried manager, and the president speaks and says that he has changed his mind. And now I will be getting paid for those 35 hours, but most of them will have to be after my contract, that is supposed to expire in August, but according to them may or may not exist, is over in the off-season. And they will consider all the extra money they are going to pay me, July, August, as banked time. With no plan to keep track of this at all, and no prior person having ever done this. I'm not stupid, so I said that sounds fair, I guess, and didn't sign anything before leaving. Their parting words were, also, we need your pay stubs back, because we forgot to get copies, so just bring them in for your next shift. I'm not stupid, so I leave and immediately call the provincial government and relay this. Woman on the phone goes, I'm so glad to hear from you again. We haven't been able to get a hold of your manager since the first call where she promised to send us your pay stubs. Could you possibly provide us with them? Turns out the meeting I just had was spurned on by the provincial government, wanting records of my employment there, and proof of my having received the proper amount of money each week. And the club was now screening the phones for government calls. So I send the government my real pay stuff and supporting bank documents. My manager is now calling, freaking out that I didn't send her my original pay stubs. Just watermark copies that stated Company P. Yeah, in the background. I ignore her. Couple days later, I get a phone call from the federal government fraud division. It turns out that when I reported this to the province, they checked how many grants this business had gotten over the years, and reached out to the most recent employees under it. 5 different people reported the same treated I had. Not the promised hours, no pay stubs, barely making money. So over the course of at least 5 years, the manager was pocketing about $5 each summer for at least 6 years. It also turns out stealing from the government is a really poor idea when you live off unemployment for half the year. So at this point, I'm just trying to finish out the 2 weeks left in my contract. My manager knows I ratted her out, and it's why she's under investigation. She comes in one morning while I'm working and sees I'm sitting on a stool at the bar. 7 a.m. and we were alone, reading, and loses her absolute shit on me. Just telling me I'm lazy and a nosy fatassin, and that's why I'm going to be coming in tomorrow and working a 12-hour cleaning all the bathrooms and change rooms and in and by. This point, I have another job. I've started at. It's 7 a.m. I'm finally pissed off enough that I start to say something when my grandfather and his friends walk in, and he barks at her. What the fuck did you call her? Because I know I did not hear you call my granddaughter a goddamn lazy fat ass when you can't fit through a goddamn doorway or drag your fat ass off the chair to do your job before storming over to the community phone, punching in a number and telling his buddy to call the other shareholders because they were having a meeting. Apparently, unbeknownst to me, my grandfather owes quite a few shares in this country club, and the other majority shareholders are his best friends and golf buddies. And the first order of business was to fire the bar manager for gross negligence and fraud. So come spring, she won't have the job she's had for the last 10 years. I'm waiting to see if I have to go to provincial court and testify, and have a potential job offer as a bar manager after I graduate college next year. And the club is probably blacklisted from every student grant offered now. Most students have heard about this or experience it in my town. I don't know how the KK ever find someone. I wouldn't have done any of this if the manager had at least been nice to me and even given me 20 or sweet. But instead, she forbade me from getting a second job and scheduled me erratically with poor hours and criticized my every move. Last I heard, her husband left her and took their granddaughter they adopted while she lives with her sister. And now for the next story. Being the worst boss ever does not pay off. Originally shared in Petty Revenge, but was told I should post here too. In the year 23, the company I was working for closed down, so I sought out new employment. I was a machinist by trade with a great reputation, so it took me less than a day to get a job. We will call the new place Spiral, because of the specialized tools they made. Anyway, I started out as one of the operators. The place was owner-operated, meaning the owner was there daily. He had a floor supervisor that was actually pretty nice. After I had been there around a year, the owner and super had a falling out, and the super left. For whatever reason, the owner, we shall call him Dick, told me I was in charge. A little backstory on Dick. He was in his 60s and had started the company out of his garage. He ended up buying a huge chunk of land and turned it into an industrial park, all while in his 20s. By now, he was one of the richest guys in the state. He was also the biggest a-hole I'd ever met. He treated every employee like garbage, except for me and one other guy. If we dared to talk to each other during work hours, he would scream at us. My promotion kind of financially trapped me. Dick would have no problems talking to me though, and he was the braggy sort or rich guy, while paying us the bare minimum. During our talks, I learned that he cooked his books. You see, the industrial park was owned by an entity that he created, while Spiral was owned by another. He would always make sure that the park entity charged Spiral enough in rent that it looked like the company was barely staying afloat. He also bragged that he had taken a bunch of industrial waste and buried it on his property at home because it cost so much less. He made my life hell over the next decade, always keeping my pay just high enough that I could not afford to leave, while treating me and my guys like crap. I ended up with a 95% turnover rate on employees. I'm not exaggerating. We ended up having to go to temp agencies, and towards the end, even they refused to send me people. I had to do some careful wording, but my duties ended up swelling to the point where I convinced Dick to let me say I was the plant manager. This right here was huge. I have no degree from college, but I now had a title and the experience. I started to look for a job in earnest, and after 6 months I found one for a lot more money, with benefits. Yeah, Spiral had none. Now, over my time at Spiral, I had seen everyone that gave them notice be told to leave on the spot, and the company that hired me insisted I give them the 2-week notice. So I said I would, but I didn't. At the end of my last day, I sat at my desk and sent an email to the head of OSHA and the state's EPA office, 2 men that I had gotten to know well. I filled them in on all of the violations that Dick had disclosed. I also sent an email to the state's attorney about the books. I left my keys on my desk with a paper under them that simply read "I quit." I never found out if the state's attorney went anywhere, but the contact at OSHA let me know the company ended up with $150,000 in fines for some willful violations, and the guy from the EPA dug up half of Dick's property before he admitted to where he buried the waste. Last I knew, he ended up in jail. And now for the next story. My bully of 3 years finally pushed me too far. Obligatory sorry for formatting on mobile. Backstory. When I first started middle school, I ended up with my first girlfriend. This pissed off her ex, so began 3 years of bullying. All the standard stuff. Hitting, stealing from me, so on and so forth. He even ruined my bike while it was locked up once. Every time he pulled some shit, I did the right thing and reported every event. For almost 3 years. None of which lead to any real repercussions for the little shit. Now all of this leads up to the end of 8th grade. Me and my best friend are leaving gym class, when lo and behold, here comes my bully. He runs up to me, shoving me to the ground, saying something to the effect of "been walking long, faggot." At this point, I was pretty numb to his bullshit. My friend goes to help me up. When the bully does something new, he hit my friend. I don't remember the next few minutes. What I do remember is suddenly finding myself being pulled backwards away from the bloodied and mangled face of my bully. I can still remember how my knuckles throbbed, the skin completely destroyed, blood dipping down my fingers. I turned to the security guard that was now holding me up and asked him, "Fuck, what did I do?" Now I don't know how much of this next bit is true, as it is told from my friend's point of view. But apparently the moment my bully touched my friend, I exploded into an animalistic rage. I tackled him to the ground and started swinging like Rocky. Kid didn't even have time to scream before I had knocked him the fuck out. He ended up in the hospital for a month with a broken nose, orbitals, jaw, and the back of his skull. I was told by the administration to keep my mouth closed about them not doing anything about the bully for 3 years, and in return his injuries would be declared an accident from tripping on a curb. I still have nightmares of his bloodied face every now and again. Like and subscribe for more awesome daily Reddit content. And don't forget to hit the bell to get notified when I upload new videos.